Thank you.
Yep, we're good to go.
Excellent. Good evening. For anyone who doesn't know, I am Lady Nicaize. I'm down in Brinkley, so the Austin area of Texas, and I have now been in the Marshalate secretary role for about 6 months. And so Kat asked me if I could talk to you guys a little bit about basically what this role does and why and how. So I'm going to go through the system. I'm going to talk about everything that we're doing here. Before I get started, I am curious how many people we have on the call who are vaguely interested in this role because it's something that they might be interested in doing in the future, and how many people are here just because they're marshals and kind of want to know what goes on behind the scenes so that they can better work with whoever the Marshalate secretary is. If you type in the group chat or both, thank you, Muriel. Anyone else want to chime in? I figure Pug just wants to know what I'm doing.
I want to know what the Marshal Secretary does, yes.
Yeah, I don't believe you. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep it fairly balanced. If I neglect one side or the other, call me on it. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. If Kat, you could enable me to share my screen.
You should be good now.
I am now. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So I'm no longer going to be looking at you guys because I'm now rotated to a different screen, but I really am still here. So I basically just wrote up some notes to help me on some talking points, and then I'll be able to take you around to look at our Marshalate system as well. So most of this, you guys get to look at my screen. So the main idea of what the Marshalate secretary does is they are the person that tracks the authorization information for fighters, for all of the warranted officers, and the authorizing marshals. That's big words, big high level. 95% of it is automated in our current system now. Before we get too deep into this, I wanted to talk a little bit about when we say marshal, what exactly do we mean? And I pulled this information straight from the Authorizations Marshalate FAQ. When you say marshal, there's a lot of different things you could be talking about. Typically, you have your field marshals. Those are your people who are standing next to the field, making sure that everyone's safe. That's an authorization that anyone can get. There's no requirements to be a member or anything like that to be a field marshal. If you become a rapier fighter, you can be a rapier fighter and then go, okay, I also want to be a rapier marshal, and you get that authorization. Then we talk about authorizing marshals. So you can be an authorized marshal, which means you're that first field marshal, or you can be an authorizing marshal. That means you have the capacity to authorize new fighters or re-up existing fighters' authorizations. These people need to have a lot more experience and basically need to know the rules, not only for themselves, but in order to ensure that other people have that. They end up getting special roles in our system because if you want to request an authorization, we need to know who's allowed to authorize you. So it's a little bit confusing, so I wanted to talk about it specifically, the difference between authorized and authorizing marshals. Then we have all of our group marshals. So you have the local NAMRON rapier marshal, for instance. That person, truthfully, I mean, they are probably going to be an authorized rapier marshal. They do not have to be an authorizing rapier marshal. They are in the leadership chain for the Marshalate side, and there's other requirements that they have. But so we have our local group marshal, then region by region, we have a marshal in charge of that, then go up to the kingdom. So you have either your kingdom rapier, or your kingdom armored, or your kingdom missile marshal. And then of course you have your kingdom earl marshal on top of that. So we specify what kind of marshal people are in the system, and they're a little bit different. If you have any questions or if it's ever not clear, let me know. Okay, so when we are tracking people's information and doing the documentation that we need to do in order to ensure who has what authorizations, basic information, we need to have their name and their contact information. We need to have an email address for them. It's actually a requirement now. Every authorized fighter has to have a unique email address, because that's how we access, that's your user ID into the system. We need to have a birth month and year. That ensures that we know ages for differentiation between youth fighters and adult fighters, and even within the youth programs, the different divisions. Membership status, we only need that for our warranted officers. So that's going to be any of our local region kingdom officers or authorizing marshals. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Most of us, we have our membership information on there. It doesn't matter unless you are on one of those warranted officers. Authorization status, well, yes, that's the whole point here, is we need to know what you're authorized for, who authorized you, when they authorized you, and when it will expire, and for what. We track background check information. That's only really applicable for youth marshals, anyone that deals with the youth. What branch you're in, again, that doesn't matter a whole lot unless you're a local officer. And then we marshal duties. So we have a concept called roles, and that is how we track within the system who can authorize other people, who needs to come up on any of our reports. So to a certain extent, we occasionally will look at the information, but we are not required to go and find all of the authorized chivalric fighters right now. You know, someone might say, hey, how many do we have? Where are they per region? We can look at the database, we can get all that information. But every 6 months for Roundtable, we absolutely have to pull up reports that give all of our warranted officers. So anyone that is one of our warranted officers ends up getting one of these roles. Go into that a little bit more. Something to be careful that when we are tracking all this information, obviously this is a whole lot of personal information, and we need to be somewhat conscious of PII, personal identifying information. Specifically, we have recently taken out the birthday, so we just have birth month and year, because birth date, along with everything else, starts ending up with a lot more legal ramifications for ensuring anonymity and confidentiality of people's PII. Waivers. Traditionally, it was always considered part of the Marshalate system to have a signed waiver from every fighter. Again, recently we have recognized that we don't really need to have a waiver for every authorized fighter, because to be at any SCA event, whether it is a practice or a actual event, you will have signed a waiver. Either you'll be a member and have your blue card, which involves signing a waiver, or you'll sign the waiver for just that event. There's no need to also track waivers in the Marshalate system. And by switching, by recognizing this and switching away from having to track signatures for waivers in the Marshalate system, it's enabled us to go completely paperless. Everything can happen online registration, which is very convenient for all of us, especially now that everyone has their smartphone in their pocket all the time, as well as really simplifying as the kingdom gets bigger and bigger and bigger, simplifying the role that I'm running here. Okay, so I talked briefly about SCA membership requirements. A lot of people look at their fighter card and start freaking out because their SCA membership shows that it's out of date. It's like, don't worry about it. Unless you are an officer, it is not particularly imperative that your SCA membership on your fighter authorization card is up to date. It is nice if it is, but unless we are trying to basically give you a warrant, so you are an authorizing marshal or you're one of the local officers or kingdom officers, you do not necessarily need that SCA membership on there. Truthfully, probably about 75% of the Marshalate secretary job ends up being updating people's membership card information. We are looking into getting that automatically integrated into the system, which will be a huge improvement. I'll talk a little bit more about that later because I have some of the areas that we are looking to improve. So yeah, if you're a marshal and you have a new person that's authorized and they're asking about them, oh, do I need to have my membership before I get authorized? No, you do not. There's no requirement for SCA membership to be an authorized fighter. Okay, so now I want to show off the spiffy new Marshalate system. And when I say new, I think it's about 2.5 to 3 years old system that we have. And it's going to be a little bit awkward because I know that this is going to be recorded. I know this is going to be available. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to throw anyone's, phone numbers and addresses out into the world. So, let's see. We have a bogus entry here. We have Snuffy. He's in Bringalad because, and if you have ever logged into our Marshalate system, this should look familiar, except instead of Snuffy's name, this should be your name. And unless you're Pug, when you open this up, that should be the only person you see in this system. So as the Marshalate secretary, if you're entering a new person, by the way, there's this little add button up here. It's very small, but that is where we add to put in a new person. So let's view Snuffy's membership information. So this is what everyone's card will typically look like. It'll have all of their information. Some of it's required, some of it's not required. You see here, we don't have a membership number. It doesn't matter unless he has to tell me later. So for most of our fighters, hopefully everyone here has done this, you request an authorization. You just go in here and say, I'm going to be a rapier fighter, and I can have any of these available marshals. I can request. And I don't know why I have you on here twice, Pug. That's interesting. We have to look into that.
Because I have it as a person and I have it as the role.
Ah, interesting. So this is how your people will sit and do all of their, request all their authorizations. The authorizing marshal will get an email. They click through, authorize it, and magic happens. Once someone gets authorized to do something, it'll show up in the bottom here. It'll give rapier combat authorized by PUG, expires 2 years from when he authorized it, and actions. Some people can delete authorizations if need be, but I don't think that shows up for normal people. As a fighter, the other important thing that you would want to do is view your card. Pull it up like this. You can print this paper off or screenshot it on your phone, and this is what you want to show your inspecting marshal when you arrive at it. And it will go ahead, it'll list all of your authorizations on here. So, and then the third thing, Snuffy comes in here, he looks at his account and he's like, oh, hey, you got my phone number wrong. Edit. Come in here. Anything that is like a name, an address, a phone number, that all can be changed by the user. So, hey, Snuffy decides he wants a new SCA name, he can change it and doesn't even have to tell me. The only things that Snuffy can't change here would be dates. So he cannot update his own membership information. He would have to send me a copy of his blue card. And so email me a copy of the blue card and I can change that for him, and his birth date. We want to ensure that our birth dates are accurate because that is what keeps us from accidentally having youth sneaking in and fighting as adults and all those legal liability issues. And then I don't think most people will see this. This is one of these little special Marshalate secretary things, but I mentioned roles earlier. This whole section are all of the potential roles that any user can have. Admin is just our sysadmin. We have a lot of these armored combat authorizing marshal. So we have Sir John over here that wants to be an authorizing marshal. He's not currently a local marshal. The kingdom armored marshal goes, yeah, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, he can be an authorizing marshal. We can assign him this role where he is a authorizing marshal. He needs to keep his membership information up to date because as part of being a warranted officer, and authorizing marshals are technically warranted. And so he needs to keep his membership information up to date. Once he gets this role, when we run our reports for Roundtable, we go and grab all of our people who are authorizing marshals. Okay. I, again, did a few screenshots here to avoid putting anyone's personal information up here. But our reports, for instance, would have a section for a local night marshal. It gives us all of the branches, it gives their SCA name, and then over here it gives their mundane name, their some of their contact information and other details. But we are able to quickly and easily generate these reports so that then we can take this information to the Crown and say, here are all of our local night marshals, and they sign it and say, yes, we approve these people. And so how that happens is it's everyone who has this little local night marshal role marked on their account. Okay, so let's get back to what I was talking about. Okay, so demonstration of the current system, roles, we just talked about all of that. And that is very important for our roundtable reports. New account creation. If you are a fighter and you have had an account forever and ever and ever, you might not really know how to do this. But in the last 6 months, we have tried to move away from paper new account forms as much as possible. And if you have seen anything from me in the last 6 months, I've been blasting this little tiny URL out to everyone. If you have any problems, look at this. And so I want to, that link will just take you straight to this paper right here, which is the authorization account setup and access instructions. So I first ask people, check, make sure you don't already have an account. If you ever had an account for anything, you probably still have one. If you don't, then I have provided a nifty Google form. And what this does is any fighter, whether they are currently authorized or not, someone that wants to fight, wants to be authorized, they just have to fill out this form, name, first, SCA name, mundane name, address, all the contact information, membership number if they have it, their branch, and then their, this is, when you see this in yours, it's a drop down menu, don't worry. Your birth month and your birth year. With all this information, I can go over to responses and I can grab all that information and seed a new account for someone. So add a participant. And it's a little bit manual still. I have to do a lot of copying and pasting from one to the other, but at least I'm not trying to decipher someone's bad handwriting written on a form while wearing gloves on the back of someone's shield in 110-degree weather while they're sweating. Because really that seemed to be the biggest complexity is, oh, is that a underscore or hyphen in your email address? Or is that a 9 or a 0? I can't quite tell in your birth year. So by just being able to copy and paste between the two, I can put together a new account within 30 to 60 seconds, which is a huge improvement. And so if you're a marshal and you are authorizing new fighters, send them to do this online instead of filling out one of those forms. As soon as someone, so they fill out that form, or if you must, use the old paper form, scan it, make sure the handwriting is perfect so I don't fuss at you, and then email me. And then once you have done one of those, I can set up your account and then I will send you an introduction email, and that introduction email pretty much just sends you a link to these instructions and say start at step 2 instead of step 1. At this point, the person logs in to their account, use your forget password to set up that first initial password. That way we're not sitting there having to transfer passwords around to anyone. It just emails it straight to you. And then they request the authorizations. I actually don't request any of the authorizations for people unless I'm sitting there in person with them and it's just easier. I try and enable people to get into the habit of requesting their own authorizations. And then printing their own authorization card. I do not actually provide cards. I do not print them for anyone. You need to either show it on your phone or you need to print it yourself. And then I have this lovely little section of how to resolve issues. 9 times out of 10, if someone has an issue, it's one of these. First off, okay, you're requesting an authorization, it's not been approved. Go and talk to the marshal that you send it. They may not check their email, they may have not gotten the email, they may have forgotten that, oh, I was working with, Ivar Gunderson, and then I get this request from James Gorman, and they didn't realize that Ivar kid's Monday name's this. Go and talk to your marshal first. And then giving information about how to actually update all of your own information. I misspelled your name when I made your account. Sorry. You can go fix that yourself. Don't worry about it. If you do want your anything with dates, I have to actually update. So yes, again, go ahead and email me on that. Unable to log in, information on that. And then here is one of the tricky ones. If you have someone that goes, I can log in, I can see my account, but I can't actually request any new authorizations. What's wrong? This thing's broken. If it's an older account that we pulled over from the previous system, not everyone had their birth dates in that. We do not allow anyone to request new authorizations unless they have a birth date in the system. It doesn't ever tell you that, it just won't let you requesting new authorization. And so if you have a fighter that comes to you, especially someone who may have let their authorization lapse and then they're trying to go in and get it done later and like, it's not working. You say, hey, do you have a birth date? Oh, email the Marshalate secretary your birth month and year. They can get that in there and then you'll be fine. So that is all of our new account creation. Okay, I just looked over at my chat, so I'm going to answer chat for a question. I need to, yes, Rix, you need to send me your information. Please send me a copy of your blue card and your husband's blue cards. Can you set up an account before they authorize? Absolutely. I strongly suggest everyone sets up their accounts before they authorize, especially if we have a big authorization event like Sable Soldier, Sable Legionnaire, BAM, the Ravensfort event that they do lots of authorizations at. If you have a new fighter that's coming in planning on authorizing there, go ahead, have them send me their information a week before. They can have their account ready, and then at that event they can get on their phone and they can submit that authorization, and boom, it's completely done before we ever start. There are no prerequisites to having a Marshalate account.
Yeah, you'll probably get a lot of people who need to update their memberships because of the extension of the free things, because tomorrow is the day that all of our memberships expired if we didn't renew it because of the non-activity. So
yeah,
I got mine done, but I'm sure you'll probably see a bunch that have been out on paper for like 4 months.
Yeah. And again, I don't chase after my expired memberships unless they are officers. And so I'm going to be working with all of my regionals, hi Rix, to work with all of their local officers and my kingdoms.
Right there. Right there.
Good girl. So and you know, Kat as well, with all of your people, get them to update. And actually Pug is asking us to make sure that people have their memberships up to date through the end, basically until the next roundtable. So instead of having your membership just up to date for this roundtable, we want it for 6 months from there so that we can assure that you are authorized and within your membership for the entire span of that warrant. Each warrant 6 months, it's from roundtable to roundtable. I'm not sure that they've ever done that before, but he is specifically asking us to do it that way. Some of the kind of high-flying requirements of the Marshalate Secretary is helping the Earl Marshal verify the eligibility of the entrance to Crown list. Work with the Marshalate to make sure that everyone has their membership through the end of the range, just 9 months, plus make sure that they are authorized fighters for that. Fortunately, it's not too hard because you're usually looking at 20 some odd people. Creating the roster of warranted marshals for roundtable, that is a much bigger job because that is all of our local officers, which is a ridiculous number because probably over 100 just for our local officers for equestrian, youth, rapier, archery, all the different kinds of archery and chivalric, you're looking at 100 local officers, regional officers, kingdom level officers, plus all of our authorizing marshals. Anyone who can authorize someone else needs to have that warrant. And so I'm going to show you. Okay. So I have the ability very easily to create the these rosters. We end up having to sort of munge them around after they're created. I don't want to pop these up because, again, I don't want to show people's personal information. But, you know, it looks, this is the left-hand side of the screen, but, you know, all of our administrators, all of our armored combat authorizing marshals, and this goes for pages and pages and pages, and we go, and it generates them with the expired memberships, with unexpired memberships, and we can go and look through there and make sure that all of our information is up to date. There we go. Okay, youth. I'm going to skate past youth fairly quickly here because in some ways it's similar, in some ways it's so much more complex, and I don't want to get too mired down into the complexities. The whole reason we have the birth dates, as I said, is to ensure that we have adults separated from youth fighters. The system actually automatically only gives you the eligible things that you can authorize at based on your age. So I can't go in and see, you know, oh, what, you know, youth buffer things. If I'm going in as myself, I can't go and look at it. I have to log into my kid's account and take a look at what he's eligible to do. We still do need the paper forms filled out for youth. And that is because one line on that form gives the parent's name and the signature from the parent, authorizing them to be able to fight as a youth fighter. That is a signature, that is a waiver that's not duplicated elsewhere in the SCA system as a whole, like that liability waiver is. So we still need the full paper form for the youth fighters. And then youth marshals need to have a up-to-date background check. And so if you see here on Snuffy's little authorization card, if he had his SCA background check, his is expired, means he's never had one, means he does not have an active one. If he had an active one, that information would be here. Okay, so and if you do have anyone that is interested in getting a background check, they need to go through the Marshalate chain to request the background check properly, and then I need a copy of that letter from the SCA. Because I've had people like send me the results of the background check. I'm like, you just gave me a ton more information about you than you probably really wanted to, and that's not good enough for me. Because unless I have that expiration date from society, your name, when your thing expires, I can't really register you as having that background check. And so if you're ever working with anyone, that letter is what I need, not the actual results of the background check. I do not want that information about you. Just a moment. What's up?
I'm
teaching a class right now.
all I'm just saying is I'm sprinting.
Sorry. Okay, so so some of the cool updates and improvements that we are looking at doing. By the way, Master Martin Malone is the one who basically did a lot of this system. I know he worked with Roffin and Pug, and I don't even know who else to get this all in. And it's amazing, and it's awesome, and it's totally simplified this, but I still want more. I still want some more improvements. So we're looking at the Marshalate actually gets a full roster of all of the current membership once a month. We're looking at integrating that roster with this system so that we no longer have to update those stupid membership dates every month. Totally would simplify a lot of life. The other thing is since we have moved away from the paper forms, that's been great. It's still a little bit clunky. I mean, I've been using Google Forms and transferring things over. I view this as a stopgap solution. Permanent solution is we are actually looking at allowing anyone to register a new account, no authorizations. Basically, they can create that new account natively in the system, and then I could just go in and approve, yes, this account can be created, this account can be created. That would simplify this paperless process even more. There's some improvements in the roster creation that I'd like to see to help us simplify that task as well. And then one of the things which has been an interesting problem is we don't always know when everyone stepped up into any of their roles. So, when do we suddenly looked and realized, oh, we have someone that's been at this kingdom level office for 30.5 years. And people just sort of lost track of when they stepped in. It's like, oh, hey, you're not supposed to be in that role for more than 2 years unless we get a specific 1-year extension. But we had no way of finding that. Same with the local level officers. And so we want to start doing some time date stamping of when people get their new roles so that we can identify when people move in and out of offices. One of the problems that I've had is making sure that I get informed when offices change over. And so I've been working with my regional officers a lot to train them to message me whenever they do those announcements of, hey, this is the new person who is taking over this local office. They need to CC the Marshalate secretary on those emails so that I can update it. Fortunately, about every 6 months, we create these rosters and I can go, hey, take a look at my list and tell me if that is the same as the list that you think you have. I just recently found someone, because I'm working on my first roundtable wrap up right now, and I just found someone that's like, oh yeah, he's been in that office for 1.5 years. That means he hasn't been warranted at the last 2 or 3 roundtables. So again, if you are a regional, if you are a Marshal, or if you ever might be in one of those positions, tell your Marshalate secretary when you have changeover in roles. If we had dates, I could at least start sorting and looking at those dates and go, hey, that person's been in that role for 5 years. Maybe I should talk to their regional and see if they're really still in that role, as well as helping the Earl Marshal identify people that we might need to switch out into different roles. So I think that is the end of my notes. I would love to field any questions or demo anything if you guys have any questions. So anyone?
I have a question. So I just got an email a little bit ago to the Kingdom Missile Marshal email, and wanting to get reauthorized, which is fine. I understand that. I know she just sent me a message, and then I'll go in and take care of that. But she asked about getting her blue card info updated. So I should send her to you for that, right?
Just tell her, please take a picture of your blue card with name and expiration and email it to the Marshalate secretary.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Awesome. You muted me.
I'm so sorry. I meant to mute myself and I muted you. Sorry.
One thing that I realized I didn't say in this, which is something that I have found very helpful since I've taken over this role. This is a role that's really awesome because it is almost 100% virtual. You actually really don't have to do anything except sit at home on your computer. So if you have someone who, for whatever reason, cannot travel or be as active, this is a way for them to be very involved and to do service that they just have to sit at home with their own computer. That being said, before Gulf Wars for Sable Soldier and Sable Legionnaire, I actually attended both of those events, brought my computer, brought my little Wi-Fi hotspot, and was able to sit at those events and work with people as they had issues, because people were getting authorized. There were people that were like, oh yeah, I've been trying to get something fixed for a year now. I'm like, and there's definitely something to be said for sitting down. Okay, you're sitting next to me, we're looking at my computer and hammering it out together. And so if anyone here ever takes on this role, while yes, it is a great role to sit at home and do solo, it is incredibly helpful if you can make yourself physically available occasionally to deal with those issues. Even if it's at a round table, say, hey, complex authorization problems, I'm going to be sitting at the hangout room during roundtable, come and talk to me. The roundtable that I took over this role, you couldn't get me out of that room because I had a line of people that were like, oh my God, I've been trying to do this on email back and forth and it's been a pain. It's, being able to interact and do it has been absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, she might as well have been crowned trying to get her out of there to let her go to the bathroom.
Rick's had to
It was on authorized duty.
He had to drag, like, no, create my line. Here's the end of the line. We have to go get lunch. Yeah, I was grateful to have my.
But she probably solved 2 years worth of issues at that round table of just things that people hadn't been able to get handled.
Yeah.
And it was.
And some of the most insidious problems are, a misspelling on an email address. The secretary looks and is like, hey, it's right there. I see your account. I don't understand what the problem is. And the person can't get into it because it's the wrong email address. And those are the sorts of things that can be very difficult to ferret out. Okay, so that I kept it under an hour, which is pretty good. If you know me, I chat. Do we have any other questions or should we wrap this up? Okay, if anyone here is ever interested in looking at taking this role when I step down, let me know, because it is something that I think would be very instructive to work with for 6 months before you take it over, so that you can at least experience 1 or 2 roundtable roll-ups before you take on the role. I've been in this position for 6 months. I have another 1.5 years left, but if anyone is interested, yeah, we should be talking next spring before Gulf Wars, or about Gulf Wars next year. We should definitely be talking if you're interested in doing this. But again, thank you, Kat, for organizing all of this. I thoroughly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for teaching. Really appreciate it.
Welcome.
And I'll get the video posted tomorrow. And thank you, everybody who joined us. And you guys have a good rest of your night. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.